young girls in school. And we're so excited to be able to present this message to everybody from the Robogals, as well as our wider MedTech community. Today, I'm joined with a panel today of professionals from MedTech. We've got Szeleczky here. Thank you so much for joining us. Jayshri Masters and Trpezanovski. Thank you so much for joining us today for this special edition.
Great, thanks, Crystal.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
So welcome. We're all excited. So what we really want to showcase today is we know and we love our Robogals out there, out in UNSW chapter as well as across the nation. They're going into schools and they're helping spread the word about engineering-related fields to young girls in primary school. And it's a mission that we really support and we want to get behind. And so part of these MedTech series, the first one was really breaking down MedTech and just kind of putting a bit of a frame around the industry, what it is, how it works, and explaining a little bit about if you're interested and you want to secure a career in this space, how you go about doing that. So in follow-up from that first workshop, this is our second workshop, and this is about sharing your stories, your real-life journey of how you found yourself working and serving in MedTech. And through those stories, we hope to share insights and, actionable tips and tricks to our volunteers at the Robogals so that they too can help secure their career within the MedTech industry. So I really thank you guys all for joining here today for this purpose. It's really nice to be able to, pay it forward, as they say, extend the table for those new up-and-coming professionals. And, without further ado, we've got an hour here. We want to save a lot of time for question and answering. I'm going to kick right off and go straight to you, Chris. So, Chris, you currently are General Manager of Service and Operations at Olympus, which is where we're at today. Thank you so much for hosting us.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
That's awesome. We're really glad to have you here. And so in your role, you started out as an engineer, and we're really interested to hear how you found yourself in MedTech and where that origin story kind of came up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me in. It's so exciting to actually have some people in the office. This is actually our first post-COVID event in New South Wales. So
socially distanced?
Yeah, socially distanced, of course. So we're excited to have everyone here. It's really lovely to have the opportunity. I reflected on this over the weekend in prep for this conversation, and my path hasn't been a straightforward path. And when I was talking to a couple of people in the industry about this over the last week, it was a common theme that really not a lot of paths are very straightforward. So, you may take a first step out of an engineering degree straight into a medical-based role, but I think the beauty of this industry is there is just so much opportunity around. And I think if I can give a theme through today is you will see that opportunity. It will sometimes be left of centre. Grab it and run with it because it really is a good opportunity for you.
Great advice.
For myself, I did start an electrical engineering degree down in Melbourne, down at Swinburne Uni. I loved university lifestyle, not necessarily loved university study, but that's okay. That's what everyone goes through their different side of things. I had the opportunity as part of my degree to do some practical work, and so I jumped at the opportunity. It was a 12-month placement mid-degree, and really I wasn't in medtech, it was in commercial automation. I was doing classical electrical engineering, so it wasn't biomedical or anything like that. And started doing some work in a commercial automation organisation, doing some really cool work on building control systems, crisis centres for the Department of Foreign Affairs, all sorts of really interesting projects. And for me, corporate life or business life really suited me. I loved being in a small business, lots of opportunity, lots of challenges, and a good opportunity for me to prove myself and to actually see the application of what I'd been learning.
You got your hands on as well right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was actually really hands-on. It was being a small business, everyone got the opportunity of actually delivering and working on projects in a lot of detail, which was great fun. And my segue into medical came from this area. So I actually had a series of contractors who were working for me, who were working for one of the big medical technology companies. They knew of a role going, and I applied for that role. And, at the time, I thought it was a little bit left of centre, but in reality, it was all transferable skills, and everything I'd been doing within the automation sector had actually just transferred over really, really nicely into medtech.
Oh,
everything
interesting.
From, being technically focused, working in construction environments, working under quality control systems, heavy documentation, quality processes. I mean, they're all skills that are applied across different areas of the industry.
Yeah.
The role I took was leading a service business and an operating theatre business.
Okay.
So all the work I'd done around automation systems, audio-visual control systems, video streaming, etc., all just translated perfectly into an operating theatre.
That's amazing. I mean, I've, in recruiting for a couple of capital roles, I've had hiring managers say to me, if you can set up a home theater system, you can set up an operating theater system. Sorry, Dale, I'm hitting the table there. So is that the tangent that they followed when...
Very much so.
Yeah?
I mean, look, all of the video and audio signals are the same. It's all the same.
There you go.
Quality processes and, standardised video links, etc. So that's how I got my foot in the door, and I haven't looked back. So, for me, I hopped into that first role completely out of my comfort zone, but with a level of familiarity in there, which really helped. And I was just in awe of the clinical environment, absolutely in awe of it.
Coming from not a clinical background, how did you, because you had this familiarity of that, but then how did you get across all of the clinical? Because that's what usually scares a lot of people away from the industry. Wouldn't you guys agree? It's usually that clinical aspect that, well, I didn't do a science degree, or I didn't, haven't worked in healthcare as a nurse or otherwise. So...
Yeah, look, and I think it was twofold. I mean, I had a mum and a sister who were a nurse, so, I was an armchair nurse, of course. The company I worked for really did provide good supportive systems around, behaviour in operating theatres and the requirements and what your role was. And that was really critical at the time. But, in reality, what we were doing was no different to the corporate environment. I mean, I will never forget my first day we did live streaming of surgery. So, we were live streaming to all of the South Pacific region, some pretty tricky cases out of a hospital in New South Wales. We had the surgeon mic'd up who was commentating the whole way through this surgery and effectively teaching 40 or 50 other clinicians across, Papua New Guinea and Tonga and all these other areas, which is just pretty cool stuff.
That's crazy. Nothing like a trial by fire,
No,
Day one, have
exactly.
you in theater, patient on the table, make sure this streams now.
Exactly. Well, you've got a patient on the table, and that patient, only wants to be sedated for a period of time. And so there is, they are treating a person. You've got to be conscious of that at the same time.
It's very high stakes, absolutely.
Very much so.
And so just to kind of go back a little bit into how did you even happen across this role, not being in healthcare? Because I imagine that's a question on a lot of our new to graduate engineers' minds of how do I even get there?
So for me, it was about a contact.
Yeah.
So I knew somebody who contracted to this organisation building the operating theatres. And it just happened that person turned around and said, hey, you'd be great at this role. Have you seen it's been advertised? Now, that was my only in through the door. So certainly there was no other assistance there. It was just a matter of I found that ad because it had been pointed out to me. To be honest, I wouldn't have found it otherwise.
Yep.
But it really was about knowing someone, understanding, that contractor then gave me a really great understanding of the industry and what the crossover between commercial automation and operating theatres and MedTech was. So that certainly did help. There's no question around that.
That's great.
But
Yeah.
that was the linkage.
Okay. All right. That's good. So what I hear is that we need to follow a tangent of what our strengths already are, where they exist. For you, it was the connection and the flow of the visual and the audio and how you leverage that to use it in a different state of play, which was theater. Also, lean on the company's training and clinical induction. Definitely use that. And I remember you even saying beforehand, you made really good friends with some of the clinicians to leverage their experience. And then the other thing is your networks. Use your networks
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get in. And if you don't have them, work on creating them.
And I can tell you at some level you do have them. you have colleagues who have worked at organisations, you've got recruiters who you've talked with, you've got people at a barbecue. You know, people often aren't aware of what their networks are, and they think it's this mystical thing that, you know, I go out for power lunches and all that sort of stuff. That's not what a network is. You know, it really is around understanding who has an interface within industry, reaching out to them, getting advice, understanding what their take on the industry and what background they have. You know, no single person has a standard way of entering into medtech, that's for sure. And I think that's the positive thing about it.
That's awesome. So there's a non-linear career path there, and that it doesn't have to be traditional. You don't have to go A, B, C. There's a lot of different routes into the same end goal. And now, within your role, I mean, you've had an opportunity to work outside of service and operations into policy. You sit on the board of the MTAA, and, you know, general manager today of a significant piece of revenue-generating business for Olympus.
Yeah, and I've been really fortunate. I think it comes back to what I said in the very beginning, really taking the opportunities as they come up.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, we were building operating theatres and we were running the very first ever AI. I mean, we had computer-guided navigation systems back there for, you know, knee arthroscopies. I mean, that was cutting-edge technology 15 years ago. Really, really clunky today, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But for me, opportunities presented at all times. You know, I've had roles in corporate accounts, leading a corporate account division. I actually worked at the MTAA and led their corporate affairs, which was really interesting because it gave me a great understanding of all the different companies in the industry. I led a education group there, which was fantastic, and you got to actually develop and grow their professional development segment and arm. And, you know, now my role is very diverse again. So I look after all of the operations and service for Olympus, which is, you know, a very broad category. It's everything from, you know, freight and logistics and procurement, all the way through to our service engineers who are based at our service centres and out in the field. And, you know, for me, it really has been about seeing the different opportunities, understanding what skills and experience I've had and how I can transition that into something that's relevant and where I can add value and deliver.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Chris. That strength-based approach is so important. And, you know, you can see that how much blue sky there is in the industry, just how, you know, I think within a clinical setting or even sometimes in other industries that maybe are more mature, this industry has just got so much opportunity. You know, you can start at, I've seen loan kit coordinators who've been engineers start at the bottom and end up becoming business unit directors and general managers. So thank you so much, Chris. I think this is a really nice opportunity to segue to you, Jay, and learn more about your career in medtech, because you actually did end up kind of going straight into it post-uni. So
I did. I always had a passion for helping people's lives, and I wanted to get into something that was impactful. And I remember clearly it was third year of university, and the lecturer was talking about different industries you could get into. And medtech came up, and biomedical engineering specialisation came up. And I was just like, you know what, that sounds really, really interesting. So from there, I made it my mission really to do my research project, my fourth year engineering research project in conjunction with the medical school, and went on from there to do my postgrad masters in biomedical engineering, and then became a design engineer at a company called Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. It wasn't a straight path though, as everybody experiences with a lot of these things. I mean, back in, I don't want to tell you my age, but back then there were only a few manufacturing medical device companies in Australia and New Zealand. So, you know, I had to reach out to, I think, most of them really, because they're only taking in, you know, a handful of engineers at any one time.
Yeah. Well, and even today, we don't manufacture a lot here in Australia.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So even though I was in New South Wales, I reached out to places in Victoria. I was from New Zealand, or I am from New Zealand, so I reached out to New Zealand companies as well. And, you know, you did a lot of phone interviews, what have you. I got an interview with Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, and I remember some of the questions were, tell us about yourself, et cetera, et cetera. But there were really questions about, how are you going to make an impact to the company? How have you worked with teams inside and outside of the company? And it's really bringing in those experiences from not only engineering school and the work that you've done there and the teams that you work with there, but also outside of engineering. What have you done? And if you can draw upon those experiences, I think they're going to be really impactful when you go to these interviews. And, got the job as the design engineer there, which was fantastic. One thing I do remember quite clearly, though, was you learn everything at engineering school, or as much as you think you can, but becoming a design engineer is extremely different. So you only get to tinkle for about 20 to 30% of the time. The rest of the time is actually a lot of paperwork.
That's really great that you mentioned that,
teamwork.
though. Yeah, because a lot of times I think, and even before having these conversations with you, I think that the design side of the engineering was kind of the super sexy part to be a part of. And you go, no, it's 20% in design, 80% paperwork. So look at Sadiqa over there, who we have today with us, the events manager at the Robogals. She's going, really?
Yeah. And a lot of it's about like being able to communicate and work with teams. And that's so important, and that's still important, right? It doesn't matter what company you go to, what industry you get into. It's all about communication, teamwork, and resilience. So,
absolutely. Well said. I mean, when we look at what are the skills gap for the future, we're not talking about black and white skills that you gain through experience. It's the softer stuff. It's being able to communicate your value proposition. And I really appreciate what you were saying about those extracurricular activities. Yes, if they're aligned and they're in the same swim lane as your degree, that's great. But even if you're not doing that, if your passion takes you out into maybe coaching, a sports team or volunteering in some way, it's just the way in which you present that and you communicate it with passion and authenticity. So I think that's a really great mention to our Robogals.
No, absolutely. I guess from there, after 4 years, I soon realised that I didn't want to be technical for the rest of my life as much as I loved paperwork and designing. I wanted to jump into product management, and in order to do that, I needed sales experience. So I got the opportunity at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare again. They were setting up a small division, infant warming, but humidification.
Okay.
And in the operating theatre, and I just jumped on it. And it was in Melbourne, and I was living in Auckland, and I was like, you know what? What's the worst that could possibly happen at this stage? So, and that was my segue into sales and where I am now, essentially. So, that's another thing. If the opportunity presents itself, like you said, Chris, jump on it. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
And you don't know where it's going to take you either.
Yeah.
At the time. And I remember clearly as well, like I spent a year or two there and outgrew the role. And from there, another opportunity came up. I was there for 6 months, and one of the product managers that had moved to a company called Life Healthcare had asked me to interview. And I was just like, you know what, I know a little bit of Life Healthcare, but don't really want to join the company, but I'll go for the interview anyway. Mm-hmm. I was there for over 10 years in the end because, they had fantastic products and, ability to grow. So, even though the job description may not look sexy, I think it's worthwhile, again, taking the opportunity because you don't know, the people you're going to be interviewing with, the culture of the company. And another thing is make sure that when you are going out and looking for different types of company, that cultural fit is suits you, really.
Yeah, I think that's great. We talked about in the first workshop about doing a bit of personal branding to get back down to your core values. So as an exercise to really sit and imagine and feel what are the values and what is the feeling you want to leave when you walk out of that room. And I think that's a really great exercise for us and even for our Robogals starting out, is it just allows us to really tap into, what is the message I want to share with you, and it gets you down to your values, which then you can also make sure are compatible with the future companies that you join and the future people. We've had some really interesting research this year from one of our reports, which talks about when employees are purposefully aligned from a values perspective with their organization, that there's a 96% compatibility rate. In essence, that it fits beyond just the ABCs of the job. And I think that's what then allows growth, stretch, resilience. You're willing to kind of go outside of your comfort zone because you've got those people around you that get you and you get them. So I think that's a really great tip, to really consider your values and the cultural fit with an organization, and know it might not show up exactly as you thought it would in your first role.
Absolutely. But it's about having an open mind with a lot of these things. And especially in this day and age, right? You just don't know how it's going to end up. And if they align, and I think as long as the cultural fit suits you, you're more likely to succeed within the organisation as well.
Yeah, and job craft, much as all of you guys have, because you've been around individuals that you were really compatible with. So it allowed you to go and do things outside of your core skill set or outside of what you were hired for, essentially. One more thing before we kind of transition over to Nick here, I was going to ask, as a design engineer moving into sales, what was that like? Did you have like another aha moment about, leveraging your strengths and skills as an engineer in a sales capacity?
Absolutely. Interestingly, it was like being thrown in the deep end. It's completely different, right? As engineers, you're very, process orientated, and you just go, okay, A plus B equals, this. Whereas with sales, you have to go out and you draw upon all these different types of skill sets, communication skills. You can draw upon the troubleshooting skills and the problem-solving skills from engineering, which is fantastic, and I think that's why a few engineers have been extremely successful in this industry and many other industries as well. But look, I mean, depending on the company that you do join, and if you do decide to go into sales, which is fantastic because there's so many different types of technologies that you get to learn about, a lot of the companies do support that, and so they do take you through sales training programs as well, because they want you to be successful as well. But I mean, I think the key is really being having that ability to be resilient and
expect to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Everyone nods at that.
All the time.
Absolutely. Well, clearly you've swam. You've gone from strength to strength in a sales capacity. You ended up being a national sales manager at Life Healthcare, right? Or was it at Nuvasive? And then currently regional manager for Massimo, selling some other increased cloud-based technologies for patient monitoring. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jay.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that share. And now over to you, Nick.
Yes.
So glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Crystal. And for everyone online, this is the first time that Chris, Jay and myself have met each other. So it's a tough act to follow, Chris and Jay. So I hope you get something out of my story.
You absolutely will.
Yeah.
And I was going to introduce your business unit director at Hillrom, but you've actually just stepped into a new role of head of corporate accounts and government affairs.
That's right.
Congratulations.
And thank you very much. And probably in the theme of what we've been talking about today, taking opportunities and thinking outside the box, maybe I could end on that as we get to that.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.
So I suppose my story, when I was finishing the HSC, I had a dual path. I thought I would be doing music, and I had a huge passion, I still do, for music, performance, composition, musicology. But I also had a real interest in science, and the practical side of me decided to take a path on a traditional science path. So I selected a degree which was nuclear medicine science at Sydney, and moved to Sydney and began that. So did the undergraduate degree, very similar to the civil and biomed students that are listening, that you would do your degree, you'd have that core knowledge. And then I worked in that field for a while. So I worked for two great professors in Camperdown, Prof. Howman-Giles and Prof. Uren, and worked for them as their nuclear medicine scientist, and, an amazing experience. And as you said, Chris, you're taught so much that you don't actually appreciate when you start in your graduate role. quality control, having to make your radiopharmaceuticals up every morning and do the QA before you start injecting people with isotopes, making sure the machines are working properly. So, you look back at your career and you think, I was developing a QA/RA, a quality and regulatory background, because you had to make sure you ticked all the boxes in the morning. That then led into, an expertise in the field that you're working in with your patients, and this builds up over time. Now, I was also lucky that the machines that we used, we had exposure to Toshiba equipment, and this field is, nuclear medicine, PET and CT. So where I was in nuclear medicine, and we had Toshiba equipment, General Electric and Siemens. And over time, you start, I look back now and reflect, and you start to realise that actually I was interacting almost on a bi-weekly basis with the account manager or the sales rep, the engineers that come and service the camera, or when you rang up and said, look, it's just not tracking properly, or there's a problem with the gantry. And you build up a rapport with these people, and then eventually you meet very senior people like the national sales manager, the national marketing manager, or general managers, because the practice you work in is using that equipment. So I think that was my segue into MedTech, is that working clinically for a while, and I know, we weren't. That wasn't a standard. That was a standard avenue into the field. One day, one of those companies tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, we've got a contract position coming up. It's a 12-month maternity position. We'd like you to come in and have a talk to us. So that was a real crossroads, because here I was.
A permanent role.
Yeah, permanent role, trusted role. By then I was quite senior. I was running one of their practices out in the suburbs, starting to get reporting lines, so managing people, so developing those people skills. But you have those moments in your career where, I was talking to my wife, my trusted advisor, and you just have to back yourself. And I think that's one of the themes that I was going to raise today, that there'll be opportunities that both Chris and Jay brought up that you'll question. But I think at the end of the day, you've got to back yourself and say, look, I'm going to have a go. And particularly when you're starting out with your career, because you can take numerous risks with your career and really have a punt and give something
Absolutely.
a go.
Yeah.
So I took on this role, lots of travel, Australia, New Zealand, no real handover, because the person that was leaving was literally ready to have their child. So they exited after the week after I started. And that was pretty much it. It commenced me on a 35-week away from home travel, so fly out Monday, fly home Friday, and experienced nothing like that.
There's your sink or swim moment.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And you do realise, you go, look, there is no option to sink. I'm just going to work with this.
Yeah.
And so that was my whole start. So and then from there, built up my time there, moved into different roles, and then. The light bulb moment was also one of those networks that we talk about coming to me and saying, we'd like you to come and work for us. And that was the Cynthia's trauma role.
Oh, very
so
different.
Getting into orthopaedic trauma. So, and that partly with what I did in my first job, you were in theatres. So, you had a rapport for theatres, and there were certain levels of research that were involved in with with our two professors that we worked for. So it wasn't foreign, and that was part of the undergrad degree as well.
Yep.
But this whole idea that you would be asked a question and you'd have to advise on what to do, what screw to use, what KY to use, and
Jay's shaking her head over there.
And really that determined how effective. Like the operation would always go well, but would it be optimised by going down a certain path?
Yep.
So that was another one of those moments where you go, you know what, let's give it a go. And so after 3 years at Siemens, I then moved into orthopaedics.
And that's really what you've evolved from strength to strength, from repping
right.
to people management, business unit director, and then now your
That's
current
correct.
role.
Yes.
Which is another testament, Robogals, to the blue sky that is available in this organization or in this industry. You know, just how many different roles you could have. It showed up similarly for you, Chris. You know, just the diversity that you could get involved in. So I think those are really great examples. Nick. Thank
Absolutely
you.
right. And, you know, had I thought when I started at Siemens I'd be here in this corporate accounts, government affairs role, I wouldn't have had that mapped out. So you think, oh, well, I'll do a sales rep role, I'll move into a state-based role, and then I'll move into a national role, but it never really works out like that for many people. You know, you've got to think of the pathway as a lattice and going up and down and back and forth and lateral instead of a linear
I like that metaphor.
Yes.
That's really good. It's a lattice. It's not a ladder. That's
correct. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yep. Thank you so much. And I think that this just really embodies what we wanted to show to the Robogals today about the first role is not always the role, how it's going to show up. Definitely need to leverage your networks. You need to throw yourself out there. Know that you're going to be uncomfortable. Know you're going to have a sink or swim moment or several. And it's a lattice, not a ladder.
That's correct.
And lean into a lot of the different opportunities that come your way because it adds something to your career long term in ways that you sometimes don't even realize. I saw someone reference their career the other day, and this spoke to me because I like to say kind of it's like you're building a quilt, right? You know, you're patching all these different experiences together, and they coined the term a mosaic career. And I really liked that. I don't know for feeling of it. It gave me someone that would have, you know, still been working with lots of colors, but in lots of different ways. So, well, I think now's a really good time to, you know, I know we have probably about 27 minutes, a little bit longer than we thought for Q&A, but I think given that this is really about the Robogals and some of their burning questions, if you guys are comfortable, I think we'll just go straight to the audience and see, you know, what it is that they're asking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Sound good? All right, awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and get on here to the live stream. So we had someone comment that it was really interesting to know that even if you started out in a non-medtech background, that you can still get into the medtech industry, which I think that's really nice to be able to share that message with the Robogals. Now in hindsight, Chris, would you have any further advice for your younger self in terms of maybe what else you would say to, because this kind of showed up for you, but I imagine there's a lot of other people who have to go out and go hunting for it. What would your advice be on that front?
Yeah, especially for someone doing engineering,
Yeah.
There is a world of opportunity there. And I think the really key thing is don't typecast and pigeonhole yourself. I think it's really, really important to understand that all of the life skills and the business commercial skills that you gain can be applied to any industry, any role. And certainly, you know, I've found that, but I think everyone here has also talked to that exact same experience, whether it be, you know, looking at the fact that you are part of a team, you're contributing, you transition into a sales type of role, or it might be to a marketing role. I think, you know, people often turn around and say, well, I'm an engineer, so that means I have to do this and I have to have this path. Well, that's a good way of springboarding yourself into an industry, but don't typecast yourself as that at all.
Yeah, I think that's great. Keep it flexible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And definitely look outside of the box. I think we mentioned in the first workshop that, you know, it's even sometimes not engineering related at all. You know, we talked about loan kit coordinators. We talked about customer service representatives. You know, we've also referred to other support back office type roles. And I think, you know, for me and mine, I've seen a lot of individuals that have started out literally right off the back of graduation in one of those very entry level roles, but have been able to almost make those little leaps and jumps within, you know, 9 to 12 months, even sooner sometimes, you know, and it gives you a really good foundation of the industry because you've already kind of seen some of the inner workings from the inside out. So I'd recommend that as well. Look at, you know, where's the entry point within those organizations? What's that low-hanging fruit to get yourself in the door, even if it's not engineering related?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and have a look over here at some of the questions. Someone's asked, where do you find a medtech role to apply to? Now, you guys are all hiring managers of engineers today in one way or another, even if it's inadvertently in the team. Where do you go to find your new engineers in the industry?
So through all the standard platforms,
Yeah.
Seek, LinkedIn, etc.
Okay.
So we will advertise on all of those platforms. I will say though, I'd love to know what the percentage is, but a lot of the inbound applicants who are successful actually come from referrals. So it'll be that somebody across a network works at the company or knows someone who works at the company who forwards the ad. Exactly how I found my way into medtech.
Yeah.
That job was advertised on Seek. It was there, anyone could apply, but it was only because somebody who was a connection turned around and said, hey, this would be really good for you. Here's a link. So,
Yep.
For me, it very much is around knowing your network, being out there, and being open to different opportunities across the industry.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Same.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you finish your undergrad, you'll have to join your societies like the Civil Engineers and the Electrical Society, and there will be opportunities there to participate not just in conferences and research, but also, the social responsibility activities that some of these societies do. And by putting yourself out there and doing something a little bit different, that increases your network, and you will meet people that come across your path that you can then have a conversation with and tell them what you're looking for. And exactly what Chris was saying, it builds the network and people that know of you and what you want to do.
Yeah.
So don't ever be scared to speak up and say, I'm doing engineering now, currently looking for a job. I'd love to get into sales, or I'd love to get into marketing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good.
I agree with that. And don't be afraid to actually reach out to companies as well. Sometimes the role doesn't exist at the moment, and companies have the ability to create roles for the right type of person. So do your research, depending on what kind of companies that you do want to be working with, and reach out to them as well.
That's exactly right, yes.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So this question here is, if you don't have a direct medtech background, and I'm coming over to you here for this one, Chris, but they have a great deal of understanding about technology in general, where do you recommend they kind of pitch themselves? Do you think it's at that service technician level?
Honestly,
Yeah?
it could be anywhere within the organisation. So, we've got field service engineers we recruit who don't come from a medical background.
Yep.
There was a wave in the 2000s of, very difficult industries that closed down. You think about Kodak and, we had tens of field service engineers from photocopy backgrounds who just all transitioned over to medtech. They knew how to work in a technical environment. They knew how to problem solve and troubleshoot. They needed to understand the clinical application, but it was all transferable skills. You could come in clinical affairs. You could look at the regulatory and quality system pathways. There's a load of different entrances that you can take into medtech. It's not just about coming straight in as a sales rep or as someone technical.
That's great. Look, thank you for that. Would you guys add anything to that?
No, I completely agree.
Agree with that.
Yeah. Some of the best sales reps I've actually hired have come through the loan kit coordinator background, and it's just because they've, shown a passion for the industry, but also proven that they want to be in sales, and they will go above and beyond to prove that, and that's what you need, really, someone that wants to go above and beyond.
Great.
So if you can prove that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Some of the best people that I've seen come through have taken on that entry-level role. That one person had a master's in neuropsych that took a loan kit coordinator's role, and another person had another degree with honours and was working on the phones, but they were able to showcase what they could do and took the next opportunity to move into clinical and then move into sales. And, you will get there, but don't say no to any opportunity. I think getting your foot in the door is probably the main aim.
Yeah.
Just one more comment to that, actually. Maybe look at being a biomedical engineer for hospitals as well, because we do hire from those types of places. So it will expose you to the hospital system, the hospital structure, and round out skills.
Yeah, that's great. And I think even if if you can maybe not be employed as a biomedical engineer yet, maybe you're sort of still in school, even theater technicians and orderlies and wards. We've definitely pulled a lot of talent out of those spaces in entry-level positions because, to your point, Jay, you kind of know how the system works. You don't have it all down, excuse me, but you have an awareness of kind of how all the cogs fit together. So thank you guys for that. I was going to ask you a next flow-on question was, what in your experience have you seen graduates maybe do wrong at that point of interview introduction? So imagine, as a new grad, you're out there looking, interviewing. What are the things that you've seen that you'd recommend not to do?
I'll start. Look, I think don't oversell yourself. So most managers will realise that if you have just come out of university, say you do have 1 or 2 years experience in your field or in something else, we know that there isn't the depth of career there, like a 10-year, 15-year tenure. So you do have to put your best foot forward, but don't over-exaggerate what you've done. And it is okay to say, I don't have that experience yet, because hiring managers aren't just looking at the technical side of it or sometimes experience. They're looking for people that are teachable or shapeable. And if you can come on board, you're a young grad, 23, 24, but you can demonstrate that there's a learning ability there. Sometimes that is the key that we're looking for, and you want to take on someone very junior so you can train them up so they can be a star in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's
Agree
great.
with that. And also do your homework when you come to an interview. So know about the company, and if you can know about the industry as well. Just prove that you have actually done your research behind it, because there are a few people that you go, well, tell me about the company, and they don't know.
So when you say do your homework, you just want them to have read up on, what is the company about, what's their purpose, general high level of kind of what is the space that they play in. Because I think sometimes when you hear prep homework, it feels quite large. Is there anything else that you would recommend that they're kind of hitting beyond that?
No, that's right. It's read about the company first and foremost. There's a lot of information on the web these days in terms of the different types of markets, but just in general, a lot of these companies are also listed as well, so read up on them and look at the direction that they're going and whether they align with what you want to be doing as well. So
yeah, that's really great. We talked about in the first session about looking at the company's mission statements and their core values and aligning that back to your values. But I think it's a great point. You got to do your homework even about the company before you stand there in that moment of impact for that interview. And I feel like you've got an example here.
And the other thing I was going to say, and it is absolutely the most simple thing, read the PD and read the ad. And it sounds silly to say that. All recruiters, internal or external, will always have a PD available as part of the job that's being advertised. Make sure you understand it. And if you don't understand it, it's okay to ask the question. But the number of times I've had a candidate sit in an interview and I'll say, tell me what you think this role is. Oh, I'm not sure. It's a blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And that is what not to do, guys. That is what not to do.
So my response then is, why are you sitting here if you're not even sure what the role is? And it's okay not to know, but work out how to find out. Do your research. Understand about the organisation. Understand as much as you can around the culture and understand about the role you're applying for.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It is the kiss of death in an interview if you have not done your research around the company and the job description. So definitely make sure that you take advantage of that moment of impact that you have with that hiring manager. So fielding another question here, it's a little bit off tangent of the hiring space, but how has MedTech responded to the changes post-COVID-19? I think if I were to put myself in the shoes of about to graduate, young professional, I would want to be targeting, a career or profession that is going to stand the test of this COVID-19 pandemic, and wondering who would like to go about how, the medtech industry has sort of adapted to this moment in time, or maybe longer than a moment.
Just to start, I think, look, MedTech in general has used the last 6 months to really, assess where the marketplace is. And by that I mean, our customer base, hospitals, patients, and trying to future-proof. And there's a lot of literature out there, current articles, various different mediums that talk about, this time that particularly companies that have done well and been able to get through the pandemic use it to think about what to do next. And I think as you're looking at companies as well, it's those that have the history behind them, like your big multinationals that have had the planning, the forethought in the past, and it gives you a little bit more confidence to think, okay, well, they're looking for the future as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
I think from where I sit, and I've got a double hat here, so I'm on the board of the MTAA. I'm also, a staff member at Olympus. I think as an industry, we've risen to the challenge in an amazing way. I think that there were times there very early on where there was a mad scramble for, setting up hospitals, and we're talking everything from, ICU equipment, ventilators, PPE, training for staff members. And, Nick, you and I had a conversation around how your organisation responded and supported the industry. I mean, we literally had the health minister contacting the industry association and say, we need to get together and we need to resolve this. And everybody around the table
All came together.
were coming together, but it was focused on how do we ensure there's no disaster.
Yep.
Nobody was there for their own budget, their own ego, their own sales. It was actually around what do we need to do to actually support industry.
Yep.
And I think that has resonated down all the way through to how people are operating day to day. How all of our teams are still out in the field now, and we've got a lot of staff in Victoria where our head office is, and we're still supporting industry. And now the industry has changed a lot, and I think it has been a bit of a catalyst for change, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it has been very, very patient focused. It's been fantastic.
Thank you for that, Chris. I was just thinking about how this, pandemic, as difficult as it has been, it's impacted, the entire world. It has accelerated a lot of change in medtech. And so I think the origin of this question was around, is it a good place to go, considering? And I think it's an amazing place to go because it's actually one of the industries that we know that has the potential to be positively impacted by this pandemic, as opposed to some of the other industries that have been hit really hard. So I think that's something important to know for all of our young professionals coming into the industry, and also the fact that this pandemic has digitally transformed us in a pretty rapid way, because we're quite conservative in medtech. Even though we're innovative, we're also quite conservative. And I've even seen, we talked about how support in theater is changing, how we've digitally transformed that method so we can make sure that patient and that clinician is getting supported. And then also, I think as well, just in terms of our process and how we work with that end user and for the patient has digitally transformed as well. So I think you can know that there's still quite a lot of blue sky here, and definitely one of those industries that will be positively impacted. So another question coming through from the stream was more about an internship and how to make the most out of this experience. If you are lucky enough to secure an intern role, what do you think is the advice that you would give to that young professional about how to maximize that opportunity? Stalemate here.
Yeah. Look, if you are lucky to get an internship, I mean, that's fantastic, right, especially in this day and age. But I think you've got to be able to prove yourself during that period of time, but also network within the company within that period of time. And back to your comments, like the job that you may ultimately want may not be available at this current point in time. But if you're able to be agile, if you're able to pivot within the organisation and go, you know what, I'm happy to take this different role if it does come up. just be open-minded.
Yeah.
But it's important to, show that you're a team member, you can communicate effectively, you want to be part of the company and want to see it grow and be successful. Just have that personal responsibility of, being available as well, and turning up on time and, going above and beyond in that role as well. And again, use it as a networking opportunity. And it may not be that company you may have a full-time position with ultimately, but someone within the company may help you out somewhere else. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just if there's a door that opens out of that internship, take it with both hands. And I really appreciate the part that the networks that you make, they may go and travel and disperse across the industry. I know you guys have all seen that within your own careers, because there is, given the niche expertise that you all carry, it's hard to grow that overnight. So there is a lot of transfer and pollination of talent across multiple medtech organizations. So I think that's also a really good question, because someone asked, how long would you recommend maintaining your network long term? And my answer is long term. Never. You like it didn't. It's a living, breathing organism.
It's not binary.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
On or
right.
off.
That's right.
And it's a really small industry. I mean, we were just talking, and we know a lot of
we
people.
know 5 people.
In
And you
common.
just met today.
Right.
Yep.
It is
Yeah.
such a small industry, and you don't burn any bridges at any stage, because you don't know if you're going to be working with them in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Like, I've worked with people 6 years or 10 years ago and working with them today.
Yeah.
That's so true.
I think everyone has this notion of a mythical beast that is a network, and it really
capture.
Exactly. It needs to be demystified. I mean,
Yeah.
the perfect example is we've got a sales leadership role available at our organisation in New South Wales. I had a guy who I worked with 10 years ago, had a good rapport with, dropped me a note on LinkedIn. He's living in the US and moving back to Australia, and said, "Oh, hey Chris, I've seen this role. Any chance you could, connect me to the hiring manager? But I'd love to understand a little bit more." Easy, done.
Yeah.
But that's the network.
That's the network.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, you give good, you get good. And when I was listening to you, Jay, about, the little things, it's you're turning up on time, you're working hard, you're being accountable. There's no great mystery, Robogals. It's really about doing the little things that each and every one of us can do really well, and being accountable and being reliable and showing that pattern. Mm-hmm. That is what would mean that someone like Chris would pick up the phone 10 years later and be like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll connect you. But conversely, if those little things weren't there, you probably wouldn't have been as keen to transfer that person over. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This connection was a really simple one. I thought, yeah, you know what? We worked really closely together. Lovely guy, very capable, absolutely happy to link up. I think the other key thing, extending further on what Jay was saying as well, it's really an internship is an opportunity to learn. Our industry is so diverse. So, we have many different facets, from technical sides in, say, a repair centre, a field service engineer. We've got medical affairs, clinical applications. We've got trainers, regulatory, quality. You can come into any role and be exposed to a huge industry that you really had no idea that there was this many facets to.
Yeah.
And you might find a completely different career path, but completely related within medtech.
Yep. Awesome.
And I
Thank you
think
for that.
as well is when you get that intern role, as Chris said, there's lots of different departments or avenues. Show a bit of initiative and put your hand up. So if you do have a particular interest in clinical applications, meet that clinical application specialist or the manager and say, can I do a field ride? And that's how you're building your network, you're building rapport, but you're getting extra experience. And then, from that you might meet a product manager or a marketing manager. You put your hand up and go, do you need a hand with that? So they're not directly related to the internship, but that's part of that future proofing, and you're getting a taste of things, but you're also showing initiative. And I think that's important too. When you get the role, put your hand up, show a bit of initiative. Not on everything, obviously not a scattergun approach. Be very astute with what you pick. But I think that's important. And even if it doesn't eventuate, people will remember that you put your hand up, and that's the key.
Yeah, 100%. And I really appreciate that if you reaching out, being proactive to want to go and learn more, like you said, a field ride, or even if it's not an opportunity to go out in the field, even just asking if you could shout that product manager a cup of coffee because you're interested in learning about their work and what they do. You might have aspirations like a young Jayshri. I want to go into product management. Here I am now at design. I want to know about your job so that I know if it's the right place of where I'm setting my sights. One of the things about this industry is that I feel like everybody loves to pass on what they know. That's why we're all standing here, is that we want to share our knowledge. And so I think if someone as a young professional came and asked us, hey, do you mind if I grab you a coffee? I just want to ask you and pick your brains. I'd be really surprised, guys, if you got a no. If you do, just go ask somebody else. Now we're getting close to time here, so I want to ask, there's one big question that is, where do you see MedTech going? I don't know if we can tackle that in 5 minutes. But one of the things that we chatted about before we went live is why we love this industry. And I would just like to go around the room real quick before we wrap up and offer why we enjoy this, so that we can share that with the Robogals volunteers. So to give them some insight, is because it is a difficult place to play and be successful. It's complex. It's not very transparent. It's extremely competitive. So you got to love it. So Chris, if you don't mind if I start with you, or whoever wants to jump in first.
Sure, happy to. I think for me, it's two reasons. One is there's just so much opportunity, and no matter what you want to do, no matter what your strengths are, whether it's in people leadership or in technical delivery, there is a role for you in MedTech. I think that's the first one. The second one, and I'm genuinely not trying to be corny with this, but it is actually the clinical outcomes. It is the patients, And it's so difficult. You get lost in your day-to-day, and then every so often it just comes back to you. We launched a new product a couple of weeks ago, and we've been out doing some clinical trials with some surgeons, and the feedback that's come back on, what the clinical outcomes are and what the difference it's going to make into their procedure time. And then suddenly you're thinking, well, hang on, that means that, as an example, if my mum, who's in her 80s, is in for that procedure, which is very likely, suddenly she's under anaesthetic for 15, 17 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It's material. This is really important stuff that's changing everybody's lives every day. So I think they're the two reasons for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Jay?
I agree with that. Patient outcomes is fundamental. I was out the other day and saw this little child being monitored, and it's so important knowing that they are getting accurately monitored, because, that's someone's child, grandson, what have you, and there's so many lines going in. You just want to know that they've been given the best technology. And the nice thing about Australia is that you get access to great technologies. The one other thing I love about this industry is technology is forever changing. It's phenomenal, like being able to see robotics in surgery, or 3D printed material within bodies. We get access to all these very cool technologies quite quickly.
Yeah,
impressively enough, just to help patients, and that's awesome.
Yeah,
I find so.
Thanks, Jay. That innovation piece. Yeah,
and there are Australian companies creating their own products, testing it locally. There is a huge size for engineering students in Australia.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
There is a big underswell going on right now. So in our first workshop, I actually mentioned a couple of the actuators. So there's actually quite a big innovation in Melbourne going on at the moment. It seems like there's a lot of funding, and I see more of this coming through. So I'd agree with that. There might be more manufacturing in the near future. But just before I get too sidetracked, Nick, I'd love to know why do you love MedTech?
Oh, look, it's because exactly like my other two colleagues here, it's constantly expanding, constant change, and it's constantly changing. Like you'll have the opportunity to launch a product and it will go through its next evolution within 6 months, or a little widget on it will change. So that, for a lot of people in the industry, is a real buzz because you can't stand still.
Yeah.
And I think the industry as a whole is expanding, and that will continue. And with the new startups in Australia and overseas, it's not just, the big international companies that have been here for 50 plus years. There are so many new companies coming that they're looking for, that entrepreneurial salesperson or someone with a bit of design background, as you say, Jay. I just see it as one of those industries that will be here for a very, very long time.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your guys' input and advice and stories. I imagined myself as a soon-to-be graduate listening to this conversation and just wanting to soak it all up. If we had this sort of storytelling available to us when we'd first graduated, can you just imagine how it might have changed? Because you have a very ABC model post uni. It's I do this and I get this and I do this, and we want to blow the top right off of that. We want to let you guys know that are coming into the industry how much opportunity there is, but equally how flexible you can be with how you put yourself out there, in the sense of go to your strengths, go to your values. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It's not square peg, square hole. It's all about what you bring of yourself and your unique skill set into that opportunity. And your first role is not going to look exactly like the role that you thought it would. But that's why if you're you and you stay authentic to your skills and strengths and your values, you will be successful. And there's so many different directions you can go into. So one other thing I just want to mention before we wrap up is in true MedTech mentor fashion, we always like to offer a 1-hour mentoring session to our listeners so that we can pay it forward a little bit further. And so we will be pulling from one of the attendees of today's webinar, and I'll be offering the 1-hour mentor session myself. I'd love to help you write a CV. I'd love to help you work on your LinkedIn profile, help do a personal branding workshop with you to get really down to those core values and help you present for that moment of impact when you do get your first interview in MedTech. So please make sure that you like and share, and we will also put this out within the Robogals communications, and we'll let you know who we've selected.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We are at time, just 3 minutes over. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up today, and thank you guys for your time.
Great,
Thank
Crystal.
you, Crystal.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Cheers.